Hello and welcome, stargazers. It's 8 p.m. here, your intrepid star guide, and welcome back to part 2 of our deep dive into the Mary Celeste ghost ship mystery. And if you haven't listened to part 1 yet, I highly recommend starting there for the full context. Quick housekeeping: follow us on Instagram at the Outlaw Astrology and Pinterest at Outlaw Astrology, and for our daily insights, check out our YouTube channel and subscribe to our newsletter. Please like, share, and subscribe to... Please like, subscribe, share, and review our podcast on whatever podcast platforms that you use most and like the best, so that other people can find us. But in particular, Apple iTunes and Spotify. And a trigger alert: this episode contains themes of mysterious disappearance and maritime incidents, and if you are sensitive, please take care of yourself. And now, onward. Alrighty, so we're going to go with the theories and the speculations. So, about the crew's disappearance, and whether or not these are rational, whether or not they could be supernatural, etc. So, theory number 1. Based on the physical evidence that the investigators found when the Del Gracia brought the Mary Celeste into harbor, because it was going to be a salvage and they needed to have that investigated before they could claim any money, because the Mary Celeste was a lucrative salvage. And the investigators were of a different mind. And the mind that they were of was that some of this isn't adding up. There were blood stains. There was what looked like an axe in the bow. I mean, there was just... the weapon, the sword of the Breeze's sword had what appeared to be blood on it. There was blood in other places, and it just seemed. And by the way, please listen to the part 1, previous episode 5. This is episode 6, I believe, if you want more context. But that was the idea. The investigators looked at that and thought to themselves, this seems a little curious to us. We think that there's foul play here. However, other people are of the opinion that the theory ignores the fact that if Morehouse was involved in this foul play, and that he'd actually spotted the ship sooner than he said, and that he and his crew were trying to run game to make money, it's hard to find support. These theories were not easily believed in. But the suspicion wouldn't die. And newspaper reports suggested insurance fraud on the part of someone else who was involved with this ship, and that it had been overly insured. And I guess, Winchester is a name that comes up, which is really curious, because that makes me think of the Winchesters on Supernatural. That name, just really 19th century name, it just interesting. Okay, and so the person who was said to invest in the ship and to insure it, it was heavily overinsured, is the opinion, and the persons who brought out the insurance and invested said, you know what, we got proof. We got proof. There's no way that we did that. And to be clear, there was never an investigation on any wrongdoing on the part of investors or the people who insured the ship. And this went on for, years. And it was suggested that many years later, in 1931, that Morehouse could have laid in wait for the Mary Celeste and then lured Captain Biggs and his crew on board a Del Gracia, killed them there, because that's a theory. And other people argue that Morehouse's ship was much slower, and she left New York 8 days after Mary Celeste had departed, and would not have caught the Mary Celeste before she had reached Gibraltar, so they're like, no, that doesn't make any sense. Another theory posits that Briggs and Morehouse were partners in this conspiracy, that Morehouse didn't get the jump on Briggs, they were partners. So they were going to share the salvage proceeds, but no evidence exists that the two even knew each other or that there was even a friendship. Someone else makes note that if Morehouse and Briggs had been planning such a scam, they would not have devised such an attention-drawing mystery. And he wonders why Captain Briggs would have abandoned his own child. If he intended to disappear permanently, wouldn't he have taken his own child with him? Yes, there were pirates active off the coast of Marco at that point, but the observation is that the pirates would have looted the ship. But with the personal possessions, those were left undisturbed. And so they find it curious that a sword and other expensive items that could have been used to make money or to be, disappeared into the black market, as it were left undisturbed. If pirates had been involved, they would have looted the ship. They would have taken anything they thought was of value. They wouldn't have left anything behind, so why were things left behind? And as late as 1925, a historian surmised that Captain Briggs did the dirty deed and then killed himself in a fit of religious mania. When he spoke with Briggs's descendants, this historian decided to apologize and withdraw his theory in the later edition of the book, which he had put in the first edition. He had to edit it out in the second. So, a fit of religious mania, well, that wouldn't have been unusual in the 19th century in the colonies at that point. Yes, Christianity was a really big deal. He clearly was a man from what I'm reading in my notes. He was a person that people seem to believe had some sort of religious fervor. Now, if I'm going to look for religious fervor, where would I cast my eye in a chart? And I'd love to cast my eye, but I've got all of these browsers windows open. It's just unreal. So, where would I look? Well, I'll tell you. I'd look at Neptune. And Neptune is hanging out, as I said, in Aries at 23rd degree. And let's check out the tightest that I can find. So it's the MC is in a trine with the MC. Now, that can be a good thing and it can be a bad thing. Neptune can bring disillusionment. It can bring disenchantment. It can be a crisis of faith. However, this is a trine. And so, perhaps, all the faith in the world. Perhaps, in the face of inclement weather, or pirates, or other challenges that might come from having a career bound to the sea, you might decide to be idealistic. You might believe that God will take care of you, or Jesus, or whatever deity or saint one might pray to for safe passage on the ocean. And so when you see a trine, you might think that is good. Traditionally, it is. However, in modern astrology, modern eclectic astrology as I practice it, the MC at 23 degrees and Neptune at 23 degrees is an excess of fire. It's a lot. It is maybe being impulsive. It is following one's emotions. It is following one's, in the moment. Instead of letting that emotional wave ebb and making a decision, it's also being idealistic. It's like, we've done this all before, and this is a calculated risk we can take. Because keeping in mind, alcohol is still a big money maker even today. And it would have been a huge money maker back then. And a pirate coming on board a ship to salvage whatever's on it would definitely have taken all of the booze, which was what was in the hold. So Neptune is also about being disillusioned. And Aries energy, well, that's about impulse. And so when you have a trine, you have someone who might let things slide that would be wise to take care of. So how secure was that hold with the booze in it? Fire whiskey is what it has been called by indigenous peoples. How secure was that hold? Who had access to it? Was it just Briggs? Did he only have the only key, or did his crew have a key as well? Who got in there? Who could get in there? Because let's just, like I said, money is a great motivator. It really is. And so when you see that trine between the MC, which is global, eclectic, very holistic, very big picture thinker in Sagittarius, the eternal student, the eternal questioner. There are a lot of questions about this particular case. And that went on well until the 30s. And I'm talking about it, over a century later. So a century would have been 1972, and I am not sitting in 1972. I am 50 years past even that date. Okay, over 150 years ago, and we're still talking about it because it boggles the bloody mind, okay? So we have a little bit of naivete, maybe, a little bit of idealism, and maybe a belief that God or our faith, because Neptune is about faith, that our faith in a higher power might save us, because religious fervor. The theory is that Captain Briggs got a little greedy, did in his crew so he could have all of the money, and then felt guilty about it and committed suicide. And there are people like, no, that's just ridiculous. Ridiculous. Okay? There are people who believe that. And so now we get to the natural phenomenon. And so the assumption is that some extraordinary alarming circumstance must have arisen to get the crew to abandon a seaworthy ship with ample provisions for no apparent reason. And the explanation was the sounding rod on the deck, which is basically checking water in the hold. And the suggestion was that the ship was abandoned after a false sounding because of a malfunction, perhaps the pumps, that created a false impression that the water was taking on, that the vessel was taking on a lot of water. It looked as if it were going to sink. Is it possible that the crew jumped off to save themselves? That is one. And there was also a severe water spout event. And water spouts are really curious looking things. And this could also suggest that right before the abandonment, which means it's possible they encountered a water spout, and it could explain the amount of water on the ship and the ragged state of the sails and the rigging. There was also low barometric pressure, which the spout would have generated, and it would have driven water up into the pumps of the ship, and it would have led the crew to overestimate the amount of water that the ship was taking on, and they thought it was in danger of sinking, and so this might be the reason why they jumped off ship. Are there other explanations that include the possible appearance of a displaced iceberg, fear of running aground, and a sudden submarine earthquake, meaning an underwater earthquake? And evidence suggests that an iceberg drifting that far south was unlikely. Other ships would have seen it, and there's more consideration that it drifted toward the reef off of Santa Maria Island. And another theory that is floated, that Briggs feared the ship would run aground and launched the yawl, in hopes of reaching land. And that it's possible that the wind could have lifted and blew the ship away from the reef while the rising seas swamped and sunk the lifeboat. Okay, so those are some of the theories. And as of 1886, January 24th, drew attention to the fact that a vessel carrying alcohol had exploded. And so there's a idea that maybe an earthquake in the seabed caused sufficient turbulence to damage the Mary Celeste's cargo, releasing noxious fumes, and an imminent explosion might have led Briggs and the rest of the crew to abandon ship, and the hatches were displaced, so it looked as if there was an inspection or an attempted airing had taken place. Is it possible there was fear that the alcohol could have exploded, and that fear caused everyone to jump off ship? And so there are a lot of people who had held that theory very strongly. And so those are some of the theories. And then as of 2006, to test this theory, first of all, there was a lack of damage from an explosion, so that weakens it. But there was an experiment done by Channel 5, and a chemist from University College London decided if they could, that experiment revived the explosion theory. They built a model. A model was built of the hold, and paper cartons were representing the barrels. And using butane gas, they created an explosion that caused a considerable blast and fall and a ball of flame. But there was no fire damage within the replica of the hold that they made. So the chemist suggested that they created a pressure wave type of explosion. There would be a spectacular flame, but there would be relatively cool air. There would be no soot behind. There would be no damage, no scorching. Okay? So that is one of the theories that was being touted as a possibility of what could have happened on the ship. So those are some of the man-made things of what could have happened. And it has been retold over and over and over and over. Now, do I think this ship is... I don't see it as particularly, in my opinion, very supernatural, But when things happen and they don't make sense, yes, the supernatural will be invoked most of the time. Most mysteries, in my opinion, and God love me, I hope that this is the case. But I am receptive to the fact that sometimes weird things, and I mean weird, W-Y-R-D, happen when it comes to life, when it comes to anything. So, in this particular case, fact and fiction tend to be very intertwined. So it's difficult to tell what truth is and what fact is. I have not, in my notes, seen anything that seems to suggest anything supernatural about the event, only that it is highly mysterious. Now, if we're looking at astrological aspects, let's take a look at Pluto. Now, Pluto is currently in this chart. It is in Taurus at 19 degrees. It is in the third house. Now, the third house is about the local. and newspapers and things of that nature. Pluto has a tendency to be highly transformative where it is concerned. And there have been a lot of movies, that's media. And that would be Neptune energy. So films would be Neptune. Newspapers, books, and things of that nature. Locally, that would be the third house. And Pluto is there hanging out, being disruptive, you know. It is a case that does not die. It seems to be solved, and then it rises again, and then fact and fiction become highly intertwined. So when you see fact and fiction highly intertwined, I have a tendency to go look at Neptune to see what it's doing, and to see if it's having any conversations with, say, Uranus, or Mercury, as it were. So Uranus is a little too early in Leo in order to form any sort of relationship that I would consider significant. But Neptune is also glamour. It's the fact and the fiction. And when you're looking at outer planets, by the way, you're always going to look at the house before you look at the sign. And you can also look at the elements. So I would go house, I would go element, and I would look at aspects, and then I would consider the sign. So it's fiery, enthusiastic, inspiring. And this is also a tendency to be very idealistic, to have faith, and maybe not see the forest for the trees. And we're talking about glamour. So mysterious and confusing, because film and TV and novels were written based on the event, and it's very easy for the fact to get muddled with the fiction. And Neptune is when fact and fiction gets muddled in the public eye, which is where the MC is. The MC is about the public reputation of the case, and it is got the MC hanging out in the 10th house, and the sun is there. So a lot of historians, a lot of authority figures hanging out. What do the authority figures have to say about this? Most of the people in authority have either foul play, or the weather went off, and how that foul play happened, nobody knows, because everybody has a different idea of how that's supposed to look. So when it's foul play based on insurance fraud, okay, well, the case doesn't fit neatly into that. What about foul play? Because keeping in mind, Pluto's also the bone collector. And it usually has an affinity with the 8th house, but it's hanging out in the 3rd. So we're talking about death here. Let's check out the Titus aspect here. So it is at 19 degrees, and it is in a trine aspect with Saturn, very tightly with Saturn. We're going to be looking at the Titus between Saturn and Venus and Saturn. And Venus and Saturn have 1 degree orb between them. They're in Capricorn, they're in 11th house. The steadfast, the loyal, the devoted, working hard towards one goal type of vibe. The whole point would be in this to get a sense of detail and proportion to what actually happened on that ship, so that they can have closure, so that the Briggs family can have closure, so that the Morehouse family's reputation isn't besmirched. It's to be clear, to be steady, to be empirical, to be logical, reasonable, and work hard and steady to finding the truth without any of the fact or fiction, without any theories, without any made-up stories. We just want the facts, man, just the facts. And Pluto is in an earth sign, so practical, steadfast, grounded. Taurus energy does not necessarily not like change. It wants change on its own terms. So values would be a big deal for a Taurus. And staid beliefs, values being disrupted, because This case would disrupt what you believe is possible. It would make you question people you think you know. So everybody that knew Captain Briggs and his crew would be thinking their beliefs about these people, their values of being steadfast and steady would be upended, would be challenged. And Venus is involved there, and Venus is usually about attraction, but it's also about harmony, and it's about staying true, and it's right on alongside of Saturn, staying true, standing behind, being loyal, and so there are people in that particular community, there are people absolutely loyal. The Briggs family would absolutely be loyal to their ancestor, saying, nope, he did what he was supposed to do. And there will be other people going, well, they don't know this person, so they have their own theories. And so that's what Pluto was doing, and it's forming aspects to Saturn and also to the descendant in Virgo, which would be a grand trine between a grand Earth trine. So steady, grounded, clear-headed, practical. So this case does not come off to me as particularly supernatural. It comes off to me as people doing the best that they could and trusting in, like Neptune, trusting in their abilities and trusting in their skills and trusting that they've done all that they can to make this voyage. Because even the wife of the Captain Briggs said, as long as things keep going on as they've been going on currently, nice and smooth, I think this is going to be a good cruise. So everybody was optimistic at the outset. And it wasn't like wild optimism. It's the optimism that comes from someone with experience and skill, knowing that it's going to be smooth because they know what they're doing. I have no problem trusting in their experience and their experiences. Now, we've got Mercury hanging out the second degree of Capricorn, and it's depositing to Saturn in the same house. They're both co-present. And so, hard work with an objective. Being a sailor is exciting to the rest of us on land, but it is a lot of work. You're not sitting around just cruising like you see in those TV shows where people are on yachts. I mean, it was effort. Ships are not made of steel, they're made of wood. It requires a lot of effort to keep it seaworthy, to keep it calm, to keep it sound. Wooden ships are easily damaged. So we're looking at the sixth house, an unexpected, shocking event happening in the everyday. This was supposed to be routine. A routine run to Italy and back with an experienced crew should have gone a certain way, and such is life, it didn't go that way. Okay? And so Mercury at 2 degrees is very grounded. I don't need to make any changes. It's very Taurus energy. Don't need to make any changes. And I need to check in with my crew. Everybody's connected. We all know each other, because being on a ship in the middle of the ocean is very intimate. So we have to cooperate. We have to collaborate. 11th house is friendly collaborators, I would see it as. Co-present with the Sun, co-present with Venus and Saturn. Valuing people that we trust, that are in our comfort zones, who are experienced, have expertise. I know I'm banging on about that, but yes. Now, if we're going to look further, let me have a look at the lunation. So it was a waxing crescent. Now, waxing crescents are 45 to 90 degrees ahead of the sun. So that means most of the moon is hidden, and the light of the sun only lights up a portion of it. And when you're looking at a waxing crescent, things are taking shape. That means a lot is hidden. There are a lot of unknowables, and it's hard to predict. Now, the moon is hanging out in the 12th house of things that are hidden. meaning that it was very shape-shifty, ambiguous energy. They had no way of knowing that this is how it was going to turn out. They went got on their ship and sailed and did everything that they did as experienced sailors under the knowledge that they were capable. They could handle whatever happened. And it just so happened that things just didn't go like that. So when we're looking at a waxing crescent, we're looking at it moving towards the next phase, which would be a first quarter moon, which would be a crisis of consciousness. And so basically we have an idea that's taking shape. That means, what does this mean for this? Well, it means that a lot of variables were hidden. A lot of variables were unknown, and a lot of variables couldn't be predicted. Now, the moon is in opposition with Uranus, and that is the unexpected. Your comfort zone being upended in the everyday. This is an everyday cruise. This is an everyday experience. It should have gone one way, meaning we get there, we come back, I go hang with my wife and kids, the crew goes and hangs with their families, it's all lovely and wonderful, and we've got a 2-degree or between 3 degrees of Aquarius and 5 degrees of Uranus at 5 degrees of Leo. By the way, that Uranus in Leo is calling the shots on that moon, and they're in an opposition energy with one another. So the moon in Uranus is the unexpected. Your comfort zone being expanded in a shocking and unexpected and unpredictable way that you could not see coming. It's like that plot twist that comes, and I was going to say a film, but if I tell you there's a plot twist and you haven't seen it, it's going to be really annoying for you. But let's just say it's a really good plot twist, except in this case, it was a terrible plot twist, and it brought with it the chaos than the unexpected. And Leo is not in its strength. Uranus is not in its strength in Leo. And it's in the 6th house of routine. So an upset to their daily routine and their comfort zone and safety would be that Uranus a shot called moon in the 12th house, meaning they didn't see it coming. They were never going to see it coming. And even had they done so, I believe that this crew did everything they could have done, given their experience, to try to turn the situation around. But here's the question, where did they go? To this day, no one, I don't believe, has ever seen anybody from that ship. They just disappeared. Captain Briggs did not reunite with his school-age son Arthur because his young daughter was on the ship with his wife, and his child was left with the grandparent. And people say we knew him. He never would have left his own child. So something seriously might have gone wrong. These people were members of our community. They would hardly leave their homes, their families, their children, their money. They wouldn't leave the lives they've established to go nowhere and do nothing. So what could have happened? Now here's the interesting thing. Let me check one last thing. Okay, so here's the interesting thing about all of this. I would say that given the time period and given the mention of religious fervor, that the captain, more than likely, and his wife were more than likely God-fearing people. And I believe that they probably put their faith in the divine. And that's probably about as much spirituality as we're going to get. And the investigator who believed that Briggs might have committed suicide in religious fervor obviously had the opinion that the man was a God-fearing soul, okay, and his wife as well. Meaning, attending church, being part of the community, was probably very much a part of his everyday existence. So far, we've looked at Pluto, we've looked at Mercury, we've looked at the lunar phases for this particular episode, and we've also revisited Neptune and Uranus, and we've given the tightest aspects that I can and on this. So, what do you think? Do you think it was insurance fraud? Foul play due to insurance fraud, or a salvage scheme, or foul play due to what was in the cargo hold? Or was it possible that the ship exploded? Because a chemist proved that it could have burnt up, and that damage could have been caused by the fumes from the alcohol in the hold, and could have, damaged the ship, but not horribly. And they fled. But then where did they flee to? Wouldn't they have gone home? Wouldn't they have returned to their families? What happened? So those are some of the theories that still to this day continue. Even I'm wondering. I'm like, okay, wait a second. But then again, I'm doing it as me, okay? I don't know these people. I'm doing it as me, the same way you're wondering as you. So what do you think? Insurance fraud? Foul play? Or did inclement weather just get the better of them? That's another theory. It's possible that, they did everything they could do and did everything right, which was in their capability and their experience, and it still didn't land well, okay? So, what do you think? And the reason why we're going to do all this loveliness, I like to do this, is because I'm very curious about this. Now, the impact on things, cultural influence, let's go with the cultural influence because that interests me the most. There are a lot of films written about this particular case. And as we all know, that it's very difficult to sort out fact and fiction from anything. So we've had the Los Angeles Times telling the story in June of 1883, and they tell the story in which there was a fire in the galley, and dinner was untasted and cold, so they assumed that maybe it was a fire. The first mate, they got the first mate's name wrong. They attributed the first mate's name as Briggs, and that was the captain, not the first mate. And they also said there was live chickens aboard. Another magazine called Cornhill, also in January of 1884, suggested that the ship would never be forgotten. And this is basically Arthur Conan Doyle. He was at that point 25-year-old surgeon at the time. And his version of the story didn't adhere to the facts at all. He called the ship Marie Celeste, gave the captain a new name, and the fatal voyage took place in 1873 from Boston to Lisbon. And the vessel carried passengers and had a titular character called Jefferson. And there were a lot of groovy and ungroovy changes. And the captain is killed due to racial hatred. And the rest of the ship's company also is done in. And only Jefferson is spared because he has a magical charm that the killers and the killer and his accomplices venerated. He didn't expect, Doyle did not expect the story to be taken seriously at all. And, that was funny. He didn't think it was going to be taken seriously, but apparently it was. And so, as late as 1904, there was yet another story, and this story said that the crew was picked off by a giant octopus or a squid, and according to the Natural History Museum, giant squids can reach as much as 15 meters, that's 49 feet in length, and have been known to attack ships. and that such a creature could have picked off crew members, but it was unlikely they would have taken a lifeboat and the ship's navigational instruments. And so it goes on for like this from 1913, which was an alleged survivor's account, and that there was a swimming contest, the platform collapsed, and everybody were drowned and eaten by sharks. 1924, another person claims to be, one was a steward, this one's a boatswain, and he was a member of the crew, and Briggs and his crew were the role of the predators, and they saw a derelict steamer, and they boarded it, and find gold and cash in the safe, and so they split the money, abandon the Mary Celeste, and seek new lives in Spain. So you can get the idea where all the magic happened. And so that would be the fantastical, and that's also where you get Neptune, the ability to weave fantastical tales regarding this particular story. And I think that is for me, one of the most interesting things about this. I am less interested in maritime history or regulations, but the current evidence that I have seen is, pretty non-existent at all. And so now the interesting thing about the Mary Celeste is there is no clear consensus on one scenario. This mystery has been, niggling in the imaginations of countless people, including the families of the lost sailors and others who have tried in vain to solve this particular riddle. And so when we're talking about ghost ships, the sea is not known to give up its secrets. And one last thing, ghost ships are not unique in maritime history. It is not uncommon for ghost ships to be sighted in the fog or the inclement weather conditions. As a matter of fact, the Mary Celeste is not the first known ghost ship at all. Okay? So, and now, let's do a key takeaway. So, some mysteries serve as mirrors, reflecting our own search for meaning in the unexplained. And since this particular story has a lot of fantasy going on, that is probably why it has endured as a story, as a film, in films and in movies, with some pretty outlandish theories as takeaways. So, what you want to remember is, when you encounter the unknown, you encounter the uncanny, it's wise to be curious about it, to ask questions, because that same unknown and uncanny also exists in the vast expanse and the wilderness that is your inner world, your internal self. And so, looking into these stories gives us an opportunity to look without ourselves, but also to ask those same questions within ourselves. What is the mystery within us? What is unexplained within us? What fantasies exist within us? Because that's how we better comprehend who we are. And so today I just lost my train of thought there. Sorry. So today, what we're thinking about is that the psyche doesn't give up its secrets either. If you are interested in more information, please join our newsletter, Daily Stargazer. You can find us on Pinterest, Instagram, and YouTube. Those links are located in the show notes. And thank you very much for hanging in here with me. Until next time, keep your hearts open and your spirits curious. This is APM, Peace and Astro Magic.